Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Please continue to eat while we introduce our speaker. My name is Eddie Hayes. I'm the current chairman of the board of the World Trade Center of New Orleans. On behalf of the World Trade Center of New Orleans and our over 1,000 corporate and individual members, I would like to thank all of you for coming out this morning and welcome you to our first installment of the 2015 Executive Speaker Series. Before we begin with the program and introduce our speaker this morning, I want to thank our sponsors for today's event, Curran and Connors, the Port of South Louisiana, and Waldemar S. Nelson and Company. Your generous support of this important initiative is greatly appreciated. And so how about a quick round of applause for our sponsors? It's my great pleasure to introduce you all to Mr. John Buckley, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Air Liquide USA, LLC. Mr. Buckley is a member of the Americas Zone leadership team, and he leads Air Liquide's U.S. industrial gas business, where he oversees the industrial merchant, electronics, and large industries business, as well as the U.S. corporate functions, including safety, finance, procurement, legal, communications, and human resources. That's quite an agenda there. That's a lot of responsibility. Mr. Buckley has over 25 years experience in business management, engineering, manufacturing, sales, and marketing. Prior to working with Air Liquide, he served as president of Angus Chemical and global general manager at Dow Consumer and Industrial Solutions. He's also held executive positions at Rome and Haas Company. Mr. Buckley holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Villanova University. Sorry about that loss the other day. Georgetown lost as well, so we both lost on that one. He's fluent in both Spanish and Portuguese and serves on the board of directors of the Philadelphia Boys and Girls Clubs and is active in a number of other community activities as well. And we're real proud to have Mr. Buckley here today and have him leading off our 2015 Executive Speaker Series. So without further ado, Mr. Buckley, please.
Of course, Eddie lets me know as a Georgetown grad when he's up here, not before, right? Yeah, thanks for bringing up Villanova. That was very nice. But no, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this morning. It's great to be back in New Orleans. I have fond memories. First time in New Orleans 30 years ago, right out of college. My wife and I came and visited. Very fond memories. Kid from the Northeast. Come down here and see the charm of New Orleans, the Southern culture, the French influence, Gregor, and of course some eye-opening experiences for both of us on Bourbon Street. We remember that fondly. And then a few years ago, came back with my son on a service trip to St. Bernard's Parish, rebuilding some homes out there, and then introducing him. He was in high school to Bourbon Street as well, just walking down the street, and he and his friends were saying, we have to come back here when we're in college. So it's great, and I really appreciate being back here. Been here a number of times on business, and it's great to be back and great to have an opportunity to speak with you. I'd like to just take a few minutes this morning, let you know what Air Liquide does. Kind of a strange name for a company in the U.S., so talk a little bit about what we do and who we are. And then from our position in industry, hopefully give you a little view of what we think is going on. Obviously, energy is a big deal in the United States right now. Give you our perspective on that, the petrochemical space that we participate in here in Louisiana. And then also talk a little bit about what's going on with trade and some of the things we were talking about this morning about skills and labor and challenges that industry has, and a little bit about what our government can maybe do or stop doing to help us be more successful in industry. And hopefully that's interesting. We have some time for some questions and discussion at the end of it. So I look forward to the discussion. Air Liquide's had a pretty long relationship with southern Louisiana and actually western Louisiana. We organize ourselves along the Mississippi Pipeline, and Christine George runs our Mississippi Pipeline operation, where we've got a few hundred miles of pipelines of oxygen and nitrogen throughout the system. $500 million of investment here, significant infrastructure. And then we also have another system we called our Gulf Coast Pipeline, which is going from Corpus Christi up to Lake Charles. So we also, well, we tend to think of that as Texas, and we think of this as Louisiana. Obviously, we also participate in the western part of the state as well, from kind of a different angle there. So, let me talk a little bit about Air Liquide and what we are. I mean, we call ourselves the world leader in gases, technologies, and services for industry and health. And I'll talk a little bit about what does that mean in specific and explain to you what we mean by industrial gases. But our customers really are very wide-ranging. It's the petrochemical industry I talked about before, chemical space. It's also steel making, it's semiconductor, it's food and pharmaceutical, research and development facilities. And so we have a very broad look at industry across the globe and in the United States in particular. And while we joke about we have only a few products, oxygen and nitrogen being the big ones, and they're pretty standard, the applications development for those products is really at the heart of what we do. And innovation around that, working with our customers, is really where we think we can bring the value to an economy and to our customers. Globally, Air Liquide has more than 50,000 employees, and we're present in more than 80 countries around the world. We're led out of Paris, so we are a French-owned company. The group headquarters are in Paris, traded on the Paris CAC, and so a little bit different angle when you look at business when you're a European-based company, particularly with exchange rate. We'll talk about that in a minute, and the changes there. When the company's run out of three main hubs, Frankfurt deals with Europe and the Middle East, Shanghai with Asia, and then Houston, which is the Americas, and Eddie mentioned that before. So we run all the Americas operations out of Houston, and of course the U.S. operation as well, and my operation is headquartered out of Houston, Texas, a very dynamic city right now, as well as you see here in South Louisiana and in New Orleans. Across the United States, we employ more than 5,000 people. And a large part of those, perhaps half of those, in the Gulf Coast region. So it's a very important environment for us. Excuse me, I have some allergies, so I'll be clearing my throat. Bothering you. You'll all be clearing your throat in sympathy in a minute, I'm sure. And, give you a taste of what we do. As Eddie mentioned, I come from most of my career in the chemical industry, and Roman Haas, and then later Dow Chemical. And I joined Air Liquide a few years ago, and I thought it was a fascinating industry. I mentioned we have a few products, and Air Liquide in English is liquid air. And really, when we talk about industrial gases, what we're really primarily talking about is the liquefaction of air. So we convert air into liquid, cryogenic, so we cool it down, we compress it and cool it, then we distill it, separate it into its component parts: oxygen, nitrogen, argon, oxygen and nitrogen. Oxygen has lots of applications, as you may imagine, certainly in hospitals. So we have medical business, a very large healthcare business, as a matter of fact. So it's an interesting example of what we do when I talked about applications development. So you separate air into its components, and oxygen seems pretty basic. We all need it. Okay, you can think of a hospital, you get oxygen, you need it there. But we've taken that into really what is one of our larger businesses, which is home health care. Not so much in the United States, which has, unfortunately, a very complicated health industry, but overseas we have a very large home health care business. And that was kind of a branching out from participation through oxygen into sleep apnea care in the home. Delivery of drugs through inhalation. So it's kind of an interesting way we've diversified our company. And then, of course, nitrogen. Primarily, we supply nitrogen for in this area for blanketing of chemical facilities for safety and security reasons. Argon's used in welding. And then some of the kind of specialty products that come out of air, very low concentration, xenon and krypton. Krypton is used to keep Superman at bay, I guess, but don't know the other applications. Christine, you might be able to help me out with that. But xenon, you got the xenon arc lamps, and so the automotive industry. So very fascinating, and we've taken that basically cryogenic, which means cold, and the ability to use, we're talking about minus 300, minus 400 degrees sea. And when you have a talent in being able to operate at those low temperatures, you take it into other things. So helium is not an air gas, for example, but it is something that uses cold, and so we're very large in helium. And helium, we mostly think about balloons immediately if you're not from the industry, but actually it's also very important in various applications. MRIs, for example, you may not know MRIs. Helium's a big material used in MRIs, but also into semiconductor manufacture. And so we've got a large business, about $1 billion business in semiconductor manufacture, where we've taken our understanding of gases and their need for kind of basic gases and gone into developing new molecules for now the 14 nanometer chips that are coming out. And so we're really on the cutting edge of that, developing new applications, working very closely with the Intels and Samsungs of the world. So it's fascinating, and I'd go on for hours about that and bore you on it, but that's what we mean by industrial gas, is a little bit of snippet of it. It's not natural gas. Right, that's not what we're in. It's really in these other spaces that I talked about before. And here in the Gulf Coast, we've got more than 2,000 miles of pipeline throughout the Gulf Coast, here in Louisiana and in Texas. And we're, through those pipelines, we're safely and reliably, which is key, bring value to our customers, whether it's steel making, and we have some in South Louisiana as well, or the petrochemical industry. We have really, I think, a great window on the industrial business in the United States from this perspective, and where we live and work. And I think it's one of the best views of what's going on in industry. And I think we've got a pretty good reason to celebrate a solid future in the industry in the United States. I mean, on the energy front alone, which is critical to our country and for this region, the Gulf Coast in particular, I think we're living in a unique time. And many of us who are in the energy space know that very well. With hydraulic fracturing combined with direct drilling technology, we've really got an abundance of low-cost energy in the United States. And that's forever changed the face of the American industry. And I think energy security for the United States with geopolitical implications. I mean, we're seeing this change in the oil price. Everybody talks about the Saudis precipitating that. No, that was the United States technology of hydraulic fracturing that has precipitated what's going on. It's the Saudis' response to it that everybody's really talking about. So, just taking a peek at the window of what this means to Louisiana's chemical industry in particular in the coming years, the American Chemistry Council projects over $5 billion in investment in ethylene production capacity that will generate nearly $11 billion in additional chemical industry output, which bring the state's industry revenues to almost $68 billion. Talk about jobs. Throughout the operational phase of these investments, they're expected to create more than 35,000 permanent high-paying jobs in the chemical industry directly and throughout the supply chain, in everything from the trades to craft jobs to highly skilled knowledge workers. And the wages from these jobs alone will generate nearly $400 million in state tax revenue and nearly $440 million in federal revenue. And that adds to what is already in the industry. So, if you've been around the chemical industry and the energy space, you would not have guessed this 10 years ago. It was going the opposite direction. We were talking about this morning with Jay about a company he used to work for that pretty much closed shop, sold up, and said nothing's going to happen in the Gulf Coast anymore in the United States. And here we are putting billions of dollars in investments and creating great jobs into the ground in South Louisiana and in Texas. Now, nobody has a crystal ball how this is all going to play out, but I'm pretty confident that this low-cost energy environment is going to continue to support a sustained and growing environment to manufacture and export, export critical goods, whether it's chemicals, plastics, semiconductors, or indeed energy products, as we're seeing in Sabine Pass. And it's not been a straight trajectory, right? We're actually right now in a pretty dynamic environment, and predicting oil prices is not what I'm about, and I think it's a fool's game. But I do think that energy production in the United States is less about finding a source, finding the fields, and it's really about efficiency now. And this is converted almost into a manufacturing process. We know the energy's there. We know how to get it. It's just a matter of getting it at a cheap enough price to be able to sell it on the market, cost to sell it at a price that's competitive in the marketplace. That's a manufacturing business, and we know how to manufacture in the United States, so I'm very confident we will continue to participate in the energy space for a long time. And that means that the marginal cost of producing a unit of energy in the United States is going to continue to go down, and that'll keep a lid on energy prices, which I think overall is a good thing for consumers and for the country. And I mentioned growth in exports as well, and I think I'd like to talk a little bit about trade. We don't export, right? Our products, our raw materials available locally, it's sitting all around us, so we typically don't export, but our customers export. Our customers tend to be global industrial entities, and exporting is a big deal for them. And, actually, we were talking before, we've made an investment with a partner in St. James Parish, Yuang Chemical Industry. We're going to invest $170 million along with them. They're in their permitting process, and their first objective in investing in the United States is to leverage the natural gas available here and produce methanol to export back to China, which is kind of a change of the way things used to be. And so it's a very dynamic environment. So I think trade is very important, and we're very supportive of treaties such as the TTIP, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, and the Trans-Pacific Economic Partnership, TPP. We think they're critical to the U.S. establishing itself as a credible trade partner and a profitable exporter of goods, and concluding these agreements could lower barriers to trade and improve the climate for U.S. exports for decades to come. In the case of the proposed transatlantic partnership, we should be able to lower tariff and more importantly, I think, non-tariff barriers to transatlantic trade. Again, going to the American Chemistry Council, they believe that, or they see now that there's on average, about a 3% duty rate between Europe and the United States. Eliminating that would eliminate $600 million in costs, just in internal costs to companies such as Dow Chemical that would export and import between Europe and the United States, let alone the increased amount of trade between companies. So it's a great opportunity, and the proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership has the potential to further open growing consumer markets in Asia to U.S. exports. Given the large population, persistent economic growth in Asia, that's a critical market for U.S. trade in the future. I'll go into a little bit more on government in a bit, but we are very supportive and think that Congress should pass trade promotion authority. Every president since FDR has had the capability to negotiate treaties, knowing that Congress has an up or down vote behind them, and gives them a lot of credibility with the negotiating partner. The Obama administration should have that as well. I'm very supportive of that. However, even with open trade, there's other things that we need to other impacts from government policies we need to be talking about. And certainly we've got the appreciating dollar, which right now is a point of discussion. It's largely a product of diverging diverging policies between the U.S. Central Bank, the Fed, and central banks around the world. The strong dollar, by and large, means that it's a strong economy. So that's a good thing. Why we are where we are is a good thing. However, it is going to challenge that trade situation that I talked about before, and making the U.S. Costs higher on a relative basis. It's certainly not the primary objective of foreign central banks to make themselves more competitive versus the United States, but I think it's a very good secondary advantage to help boost their economies, which would again be good for trade. So it's a very interesting balance. The world's been relying on the U.S. and China for the last several years for growth, and I think that will continue to be the case, particularly with the energy dynamic in the United States. Which, while there's some short-term pain there, as I said before, I think will continue to support good growth in the United States, and hopefully the strength of the currency won't reverse that course. So that was a bit on economics. I would like to just talk more straightforwardly about the government and regulations. I think we have a great, as we talked about, great situation with low-cost energy in the United States. Based on our technology and innovation, we've been able to put ourselves in this position. But You know, we have some obstacles as an industry, government being one of them. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that there's been a record level of dysfunctionality in our government and our operations in legislating, regulating, and encouraging good policy that would support and propel the growth that we're talking about. I think we're at a real crossroads here, and personally am concerned about where we go from here. We're stuck. We think we seem to be spinning our wheels from a government point of view. With all this opportunity that our industry and society has before us right now, we really need government to do everything it can to promote growth and innovation and not the opposite, not stifle it. Overregulation, non-fact-based science and economic perspective, and short-term and unimaginative thinking are not the cornerstones of prosperity, and they're not compatible with what makes our country so great. I think there's a few places where I think the government could help, or at least perhaps stay out of the way, and one of those is the regulation. So I think we're in a position in the United States where we're being overregulated, particularly in the environmental space. We all want clean air. We all want safe communities. We all want clean water. Those are all things that we support. Nobody would say that we don't want that. But we really need the government to be thoughtfully legislating, using science, reason, and balance that creates certainty for investment and does not deter the business community from making investments in the United States. It's very important to know what the future is going to hold. It's difficult enough to try and predict energy price, let alone to try and predict what the government's going to do to change regulations and perhaps not do it. And when it's not in a fact-based or science-based way, it creates uncertainty. And it's not just entities like the EPA that we're talking about. It's also, financial reform, and specifically talking about tax. The corporate tax in the United States definitely puts people doing business in the United States at a competitive disadvantage. Interesting as a foreign-owned subsidiary, the perspective that we have on that. With the U.S. corporate tax rate 11% above the world average, effective business tax reform means removing outdated loopholes, rewarding companies that take a long-term perspective on the country, focusing on research and development, and lowering that overall corporate tax rate. At the same time, tax policy, needs to incent companies to invest in the United States so that capital-intensive industries are not put at a global competitive disadvantage. And it's not a matter of Democratic or Republican perspective or progressive or conservative bias. It's really a matter of getting our leaders back on course and in balance to legislate, regulate, and adjudicate with the future in mind. And I did say that I was going to talk about people and skills and human resources, and there are really some human capital limitations that we need to address as a society and as corporate citizens to ensure continued preparedness, growth, and prosperity for what we have in front of us. A dwindling skilled labor pool, lacking necessary training, but most importantly, lacking direction, continues to plague industry and growth. One of the biggest concerns that we as an industry had with the boom that is occurring here in the Gulf Coast with the energy situation was a lack of skilled labor to be able to execute the investments that we see coming. So Yuan Chemical and the investment they're making, I think is $1 billion here, our $170 million coincident investment. One of our biggest concerns is how do we get the people that are going to build these facilities for us and then operate them for us? So while maybe the froth has come off the boom a little bit with the change in the energy price, that is overall probably a good thing. With some of the investments that were being announced, we didn't have enough labor and we didn't have a way to get it. So now I think we have the opportunity with this pause to be able to say, okay, now let's plan for the future. Now let's make sure that we have people trained. We do have the resources for the long-term investment in the economy. In the U.S., where the American dream typically includes a college education, we still struggle to find laborers and frontline managers who are the very people responsible for manufacturing and delivering all the products and services we produce. We should, of course, continue to develop leaders of the future, educated innovators and business leaders, but we must also create a brightly lit path for those who wish to pursue a vocational career and we must create an environment where these individuals are treated as high-value employees and high-value members of society. And we at Air Liquide are heavily involved in making sure that we are working with folks coming out of high school and considering what paths for their future are available to them, and hopefully a long-term career working at Air Liquide would be one of those. And as an example, we must engage and truly mentor our people. Without a skilled, engaged, and diverse workforce, we'll be missing the critical human capital component of the broader growth and prosperity equation. So this is a very important issue for us, and something we're engaged with and looking to engage with community partners on as well here in Louisiana, as well as throughout the country. So covered a lot of ground, hopefully help you understand a little bit what industrial gases are, a little bit about Air Liquide and our perspective on the industry. We're very, very positive about the opportunities here in Louisiana and across the country for us and for industry in general. And I appreciate the time to speak to you this morning, and look forward to a little bit of a Q&A session. So thank you. Je peux parler français aussi, mais je crois que je parle mieux espagnol et portugais. Gregor, was that good? Comme ci, comme ça. Yeah, well, I lived in Brazil for a few years, and I lived in Mexico for a few years, so I haven't lived in France yet.
John,
Yes, sorry.
Paul Loquan with the Port of South
Paul.
Louisiana. You mentioned earlier that you're going to be teaming up with Yuang with that
Yep.
chemical plant, building about a $170 million unit with
Yep.
them. But I'd also like to mention that you also have two other units within the Port District, one located in Norco and one in Taft.
Yes, that's
Actually
correct.
employ about 300 people in this area, so we're very happy with that, very
Yep.
proud of that. And just to give the guest here a little more background, I'm told or have been informed that Air Liquide is one of the largest contributors to the American Cancer Society. Your employees contributed over $55,000.
Yeah.
$55,000 in 2014.
Christine's team ran the fundraising for that, and Henry's team as well. Henry as well. Yeah. Thank you.
We're glad to have you within the Port of South Louisiana.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Yep. Brian, in the back there.
Yeah, in the workforce development area, do you hear anything about apprenticeships and starting to do something by way of getting some groundswell through Washington to get tax credits and do things for the apprenticeship to address workforce development, or is that still a dead issue?
I can't give you specifics on what our government guys view that in Washington. I can tell you my reaction is I have no hope that that's going to be a place where we're going to be able to come up with convincing policies and move the ball forward. I think it really has to be industry, education, school partnerships that's going to get us there. I mean, Paul, you were talking about some of the things you're trying to do here in the port. In my previous company, we were very engaged. I will not remember. It was in Monroe. There's a kind of a process technology 2-year program that Angus Chemical is very supportive of, and I toured the facility there. I can't remember the name. I apologize. I think that public-private partnership on a local level is really what's going to deliver it, because, these kind of jobs aren't the kind where you learn how to do it in Louisiana and you move to Pennsylvania to do it. That typically isn't what's going to happen. It's going to be really a job that's needed locally. Folks that are going to work at Yuang in St. James Parish, they could work there for 30 years, so they can collaborate. Yuang can collaborate with the local kind of education administration, develop the people locally. They can have good jobs for a long time. So I think it is a public-private partnership on a local level that's really going to get that done. And that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to engage actively with folks and reach out to high schools even, right, to say, hey, in a local community where we operate, people know Air Liquide. We're not well known broadly. Some of you probably never heard of us coming in this morning, but locally we are. So you talk about Taft and Norco, and folks can see we tend to have very tall structures in our plants. So we put our name up there. People recognize who we are. That's where we should really be working very closely to say, look, if you want to go to college, we're going to support you there. We support STEM That's very important for us. We need engineers as well. I don't want to minimize that. But if that's not right, I think there's a great opportunity for people to have good long-term paying jobs in the craft industry or working as an operator for one of our facilities. Sorry.
Excuse me. My name is Billy App, and I'm a freight forwarder and a customs broker here in New Orleans, and handled Angus Chemicals for many years.
Did you? Okay.
Until corporate said, we want Dallas Forward to handle everything. You know? So we went out the door, but it was a great company. But what I'm addressing here is Friday, along with some other industry people who I don't know who they are, will be speaking from 1:30 to 3:30 to educators, kindergarten through high school, telling them what goes on the river on the other side of the wall, but more especially opportunities that are available for their kids who are bright, smart, clean, to go from high school into industry. If you were on that panel, what would you advise these educators?
So from that point of view, I think we would be advocates of, science and mathematics education, and it isn't something, we can, as industry, we do actually teach those skills to workers as they come into the workplace. We prefer not to have to. And so it'd be great if the fundamentals are really focused on, and those fundamentals being around science and math. We want a well-rounded individual, of course, but we want somebody who's sufficiently proficient in that area to be able to, if they choose to, go to engineering, which is fantastic, or a science, or anything they want to do if they really think four-year college is where they want to go. But even if you want to go to a two-year kind of process technology approach, you still need to have those fundamental skills to be successful doing that. So it's critical that they come out of high school with those skills, and it's been a place perhaps we haven't emphasized as much as some other things we do. We tend to do in education, try and solve lots of society's ills there, and it's not the wrong place to try and do that, but not at the expense of the fundamentals, which are so critical.
And one more question, just to follow that up. I think my voice is strong enough, Eliza. But in your corporation, is there a policy or something where unless you have at least an associate degree, you can't go any further up than some type of real lower level position?
There's no policy for that. That's more practice. And we continually challenge ourselves whether, even in the lack of any policy, whether we really are open to somebody with a high school education getting into a professional role. We have examples of that, and we have over the history where folks who have come in through maybe a technical or process technologist approach have made it into kind of management and professional ranks, and will continue to do that. There's more than one path in a career. Typically, folks who do that will look to get further education, to be able to broaden their view, and we'll be supportive of them if they are interested in even further education. But there's no policy against it, and actually we're trying to promote that even more. I think we have to, it's all of the above approach to being able to get skilled people in the future in industry. Sorry.
Melissa Erickson from Tulane University. My question is around R&D. You mentioned investment in R&D by Air Liquide, and I'm wondering if you can speak to the size and nature of that enterprise in the Gulf area.
Sure. So we have in Air Liquide really three main areas, geographic areas where we do our R&D. One is naturally in Paris, where our roots are. Another is in Shanghai. And then the third is in the United States, and that's in Delaware, actually, in the Delaware Research and Technology Center. And and the reason we try and do that is, like I was saying, all of the above, right? The talent is not simply in Europe or in the United States or in China. It's in all of those places. And so we do global research through those three geographical areas, and they have different focuses of what they're working on. But in addition to that, so research is obviously the new, right? You never know if that's going to pay off, and you're doing kind of fundamental things that could become business 10 years down the road. But in addition to that, we have technologists who are working on kind of advancing what we're doing today, maybe into new spaces. And those kind of application knowledge people and those application research people actually are in the Gulf. They're primarily located outside of Houston. But we have, so those application developers, and they're more dispersed around the country, but the nexus is in Houston. And then we have people who we consider technical fellows. We have a technical fellowship going to some of the point around careers. We have a real emphasis, and I think it's a great one at Air Liquide. Given my previous history, I think we've got a pretty good one at Air Liquide, where we highly value folks who don't want to be the CEO ultimately of the company. Really, they want to be good at operating an air separation unit or rotating equipment, which we have a lot of, compressors and pumps, and we have kind of global experts on how to deal with that. They'll be anywhere in the country. And so I know Christine on your team and Henry on the team here in South Louisiana have folks who are global experts in those technologies. And so they're advancing technology in a very different way than we usually think of R&D as the only way to do that. So they're spread throughout the country and are here in Louisiana as well.
My name is Ivan Radovic. I'm with a company called Novasis. We are a management consulting firm out of New Orleans. I have a question. There's a lot of changes, like in an energy industry, where we are shutting down all these coal power plants and some nuclear power plants. There was actually a briefing, last week in the White House, was talking about, what is government going to do to, with those 70,000 people that are going to be affected in rural communities around the country, and how they get retrained to, get in a new wave of energy. Where is a company like yours working, on that field? Because you're talking about shortage, of people.
Yeah.
It looks like there's going to be a lot of people available. They just need to be retrained.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that the U.S. had been known for is the flexibility of mobility and in the population. And I think we're seeing, so that's a potential displacement if the policies of the current administration are continued by future administrations. So that's part of the uncertainty I was talking about before, because the current administration does have an objective to, it's not a stated objective, but they would certainly be happy if coal was not used as a fuel source, which is unrealistic. But the more immediate displacement's in the oil field, which isn't done by the administration at all. And we do see folks who are out in Western Texas, migrating themselves back to the Gulf Coast where jobs are available. So, and there's some of those skills are transferable. A lot of those skills are transferable to other industry. Mining, perhaps, is a little bit different, and so would take some special effort to be able to make that transition. So I'll be interested to see whether we need to or how that's all going to play out. I don't know what the future of coal as an energy source in the United States really is, but certainly as the track we're down, it's going to be more and more difficult. Air Liquide directly in that space was involved with a project called FutureGen, which was looking at how to manufacture power with coal and capture the carbon, sequester it, and basically take the CO2 out of the environment. That did receive support from the Department of Energy, but that project recently has had some more challenges. So we provide the technology for separating out the carbon dioxide and actually for burning the coal cleanly in the first place, then separating the carbon dioxide. So we're directly engaged in that conversation around what we're going to do with carbon dioxide from coal. We also have an active project with a Southern company in Mississippi, the Kemper, Mississippi facility, where they're producing, they have their different technology to produce clean coal. And we made an investment with them. There's about $100 million investment there to provide nitrogen, which is the key to blanket the coal as it goes in that facility. And that's a challenge, right? So we've got some challenges in that space of clean energy and the costs being very high. That plant is I think it's $5 billion now. It's going to be quite expensive. It's in the nuclear kind of range, quite expensive and a challenging situation. But we need to continue to try. I think we will continue to invest in the R&D required to be able to be coming up with new ways and new approaches. I think we will get there over time to be able to cleanly use coal. I probably overstated the administration's view. They want to use coal. They just want it to be clean. From their point of view, that's meaning very limited carbon dioxide emissions. So what we have been engaged in doing is trying to help the industry achieve that objective. Still a very challenging one, though. Sorry, you had a question over here?
Yeah, I was interested in the Glenn Eric Smith with the Tulane Energy Institute. With a global company like yours, you need to be able to move both new hires and experienced personnel between countries. Right now, the administration makes it very difficult to place new graduates, if you will, if they're not from the United States, in the United States. What's the policy of Air Liquide as a French company in terms of trying to help students work around that problem?
Yeah, so we're very supportive of expanding the visa program in the United States. I think it's a mistake we have an export industry, a service industry through the universities like Tulane, certainly educating foreign nationals, and we don't want to stop that. But if those foreign nationals are talented individuals who have a passion for working in the United States, I don't know why we would prevent them from doing that. So we are very much in favor of expanding the visa program to be able to take advantage of talent from wherever it can come, particularly if they want to dedicate themselves to the United States. And as a global company, we do move people around significantly. We view our employees as global resources. We at the United States, we have certain things that we lead the group in, and we'll take key resources from the United States and send them to South Africa or the Middle East or Asia to teach them how to do what we do well, and vice versa. We'll bring folks from overseas into the United States to teach us what they do well over there. So we try and, the more flexible that can be, the better it is for us. And we do think it's important to be able to have the talent pool available to U.S. industry as broadly as it can be. We will not be displacing other college graduates by hiring somebody from a foreign national. That's not going to happen. We simply don't have enough. Yeah, Jay.
John, with the current severe budget deficits that are occurring both statewide and on federal government, the realization that we can't print money forever and that interest rates are going to go up, a lot of pressure, a lot of politicians looking for ways to increase revenue, obviously. One groundswell that I'm hearing a bit about, and you may have heard something about it, maybe not, there's conversations about an excise tax on air separation units, which would meaningfully impact your business. Terrible political football. While you can focus on, well, you're taking oxygen away from the world, it has implications on everything from automobiles to all the boilers and fired equipment, all the fossil fuel we consume. I think it's going to be a terrible political sell, but I am hearing real efforts to get into that, and it's money. Have you heard anything about that, and what's your take on that?
I've not heard anything directly about that, so I'm a little surprised to look into that immediately. But, in general, the policy that we would have on that, and not just because it would affect us most directly, is, simplicity instead of complexity in the tax code would be better at state or federal level. And so casting about and saying, let's put an excise tax on this, that, or the other thing has unintended consequences that the government can't think, nobody can think through what the impact of those things really are. So I would say simplify and probably take, so they're looking at the excise. The excise is compensating somebody else who figured out how to get an advantage somewhere, right? So there's some deduction, something that's not being taxed over here. Because of that, they need to put an excise somewhere else. The impact on the economy is definitely detrimental from both of those things. So we really need to simplify that. Take this away, take that away, make it pretty flat. I'm not a flat tax proponent. I don't really have an opinion on that one way or the other. But I think simplifying it and making it a little bit less available to lobbyists one way or the other, say Air Liquide to engage to battle that or to get some advantage somewhere else, I think would be beneficial for the economy, and I think overall would fund the government in a more rational way. So I think excise tax is just that's casting about for, that's just, I need money and I'll get them because they're complaining the least. That's just not a smart way to do it. So I'm not a fan of those in general. And I think there's much more economically beneficial and societally beneficial ways of raising taxes than that. And that's not just because it's on ASUs, although that doesn't make me happy either.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, John, for all those insightful remarks and for coming here today. It's actually really, I'm very pleased on behalf of the World Trade Center to know that Air Liquide is supportive of the three major trade endeavors that are going on, the TTIP, the TPA, and the TPP. We think those are extremely important for the nation, for Louisiana, and for trade. So I'm especially pleased to hear that Air Liquide is supportive of those measures. We have a very exciting lineup for our 2015 Executive Speaker Series. We hope to see all of you on June 3rd for Grayson Hall, who's the President and CEO of Regions Financial Corporation. Once again, I want to thank all of our sponsors for their continued support and commitment to our organization and to our programs. And I want to extend my special thanks to all of you all for coming out today. Please join me in giving Mr. Buckley one final round of applause. And my apologies again for the Villanova stab. You guys will do it next year. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.